Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 21 of Scouting Session. I'm Jérôme Bérubé, and I'm joined, as always, by Brad Allen. Hey, Brad, how's it going?
Hey, Jerome, it's going well. How are you doing?
I'm doing very, very well. And we have a special guest this week, his second appearance on the podcast, J.Brad Johnston. Hey, J.Brad, how's it going?
I'm doing well, Jerome. Thanks for asking.
All right, so the reason why J.Brad is here, so we're going to talk about the WHL and what the WHL draft class is looking like. And so maybe Brad, we can start with maybe your overall view on the WHL class this year. Maybe like I think we're going to talk mainly about the top end players on the podcast today, but maybe your overall look at this class and do you like it first? And how's the obviously the we know the top end players, but mainly for you, maybe you can touch on the depth of this class if you like it. Like we always talk about, the A rated player, the B rated player, but like how is it looking in the C range for the WHL?
For sure. Well, overall, a lot of injuries this year at the top end of the dub. McQueen out mid-October to March. Lakovic was out all of January. Carter Bear's out the rest of the season. We're going to talk a bit about that today. And Peyton Kettles, he's had a suspension, and then he was injured around Christmas time as well. So some of those AB guys that we're either going to talk about today or you're going to see later on, a lot of injuries at the top. And I do feel good class at the top with some of the A's and B's. The C's, I think some of the top end C's are pretty good. A couple guys check out our top 64. A couple guys will make it onto there. But the later end of those C's, I'm not as big on the depth. I do feel it's a little more top heavy. So a lot of work for me in the next coming months to figure out who those guys are at the bottom end and how they fit into our list.
Brad, do you have anything you want to add on maybe what you've seen maybe on the WHL class, maybe if you want to touch maybe on the top guys, maybe compared to other years like we had in the previous drafts. I don't know. I think it's a very how the WHL class is looking is very. It's just a telling sign of what the overall draft is looking like. Some decent player at the top, and it's just like it's tough to find like real players that we like or are passionate about in the mid or late rounds. And in past years we could find some guys that we're pretty passionate about in the later rounds, but this year has been a bit more difficult.
Well, listen, I'm going to start off by saying it's one of the last leagues where you really see fighting at the junior level. And a friend of mine who follows hockey told me that there's an MMA fighting sanctioned BKFC league for ice hockey. They're starting a league for fighting on ice, but it's not for hockey. I don't know what's going on. That is completely insane. This draft is bad, but the dub, I think, is like the only reason that they gave hope to it, really, right? Like, I thought the dub always has something, right? And there's a lot of boom potential, I think, with some of the players here at the top. Like if Jackson Smith really develops correctly and McQueen and Lakovic, that really helps this class. The dub is key. So we'll see. But I think the depth does fall off, but top end, what's better than it, really? I guess the O by a little bit.
Yeah, I think so.
Right?
Yeah,
By a bit, but that's about it. It's the dub is here to stay. We need it terribly, and it's interesting the fact that it actually has one of the top goalies too in Ravensburg, and I've been watching a lot of him recently too. He's been much better recently, last like month and a half, 2 months. So that's helped a lot because he was going full Spencer Knight on me, and that's really hard to project. So I'm happy he's turned around a bit.
all right, we're gonna focus on a few guys. Mostly, they're all A-rated player, I believe. At least in my head right now. Maybe we can start with maybe Carter Bear. He was unfortunately in the news recently because of a really bad injury, and it was very heartbreaking watching that sequence and like the end result of it. And that's a player we like a lot. He's been in our top 10 since November. He was amazing in the first half. Like I like the play kind maybe dip a bit in the second half of the season. He lost his center, so that probably hurt a bit his production. But overall, this was a player we just love, and just the injury is just like a complete, a complete nightmare scenario for him and even for scouts. Now we have to figure out um, like is it really gonna affect him, going forward. We saw it a bit happen in the past with Peyton Krebs was one who got the similar injury. I think Eric Carlson in the NHL got one, and a long time ago, Kyle Chipchura got the same somewhat injury back in 2004, I believe. So maybe J.Brad, well, I'll start with you. Maybe your thoughts on Carter Bear, and obviously the injury will play a factor where we put him in our final list, depending of the the updates we get from him. Probably at the combine, we should know a bit, what's going on with him at that time. So, J.Brad.
Yeah, well, with Carter Bear, it's like you said, heartbreaking because you look at his style of play, and that's what you want to see in the playoffs and see in playoff hockey. And of course, Everett with that 1 seed, they likely have a deep playoff run. So getting to see him for a long period into the playoffs with that style of play, it's what you love to see. Not even just for us as scouts, but with hockey fans. If you look at what he did this year in his 56 games. 40 goals, 82 points. He was not a slouch offensively. What I really liked to see develop throughout the year was how dynamic his playmaking could be. Because he's listed as a left winger. He played center a little bit at some points, and really drove play as a playmaker. Made a nice between the legs pass at one point this year. Really strong playmaker. If he falls due to the injury, he's going to make somebody pretty happy down the road. I feel I'm a big fan of this player. I know in our meetings, he's probably the player that, we don't need to talk about too much because I know we're all big fans of this kid. Out for the year sucks. The lacerated Achilles, I wouldn't recommend searching it. Jérôme, you and I spoke about that earlier. Not something you really want to look up. Feel bad for the people who were there and had to see it. But yeah, excellent player, extreme high compete is the thing I love the most about him is watching that compete out there. He's just an absolute menace. Jerome's been texting me clips of him taking out guys. I think we've been sending a couple back and forth throughout at certain times because he's so fun to watch. Like I said, gets brought up by everybody in the meetings all the time. So big fan overall of him. He fell a bit for me. He's right now my number 2 guy in the dub. We'll talk about later. But still high end talent. Has the scoring. He has the compete. He has the intelligence. Good season overall for him. It's sad it has to end this way.
Brad, you and I we talked a lot about that injury in the past week. So it's really hard to really pinpoint. Like we look at past injuries, Peyton Krebs, but like there's no way to know. Like this we can't know for sure. Like we all love Peyton Krebs in his draft year, and then the injury happened. So he got hurt June 2019. He was back in November 2019. And things have not worked out for him at the NHL level. But is it because we misevaluate him back in his draft year, or the injury was a big factor? Some would say, well, if he's playing for Buffalo, that's another reason why maybe he's not, doing that well. As we've seen, feels like every time someone leaves Buffalo, they start playing much better elsewhere. Jack Eichel, Cousins right now with Ottawa, O'Reilly. So we don't know. I mean, there's no way to know for sure. But my question, I guess, for you would be ranking wise, how do we how do we do this? Because it's impossible to know for sure. But I think for the real draft, I think he's probably gonna drop. I mean, I don't know what NHL teams were thinking with him. Like we had him top 10. I don't know if like every team's he was like a guaranteed, top 10. So I do wonder like what's really gonna be his range of selection come June. And I guess that would be my question for you. What do you think like will eventually happen with him?
Well, you mentioned Peyton Krebs. I've been asked that a lot this week as well. Was the injury one of the reasons that his development didn't take off? I mean, with Buffalo situation, you look at Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen and JJ Peterka is the only players in recent history that developed correctly in that system in Buffalo, I believe. So maybe you can attribute part of that to Krebs, but I think we should probably take some blame too. We thought his skating would come miles past where it has, and again, maybe that's part of the injury. But I think part of it too is just that we overestimated his translation from junior. I remember we joked about this before on another podcast, Jerome, but like I remember saying that he was just so much better than Doc in head-to-head matches, and that was one of the reasons we were so high on him. It turns out Doc wasn't very good either, so it didn't really apply to us like we were hoping. I did talk to a doctor this week about his injury, who I think has dealt with similar scenarios and helping patients overcome lacerated Achilles. So what he basically told me was that it depends on the shortening length of the Achilles. So when they reattach it, it's going to shorten to a degree. The question is to what degree? And then how does that affect his skating long term? Because mechanically, he's already a little bit sloppy. So his A to B, he needs that to compensate. I was telling you off air, Jerome, I had a lacerated ankle when I was in my mid-20s, like sliced my ankle in half. I lost about 5% of my total peak power output, but took 18 months to recover. And I was always getting inflammation, and my dorsiflexion permanently dropped off a cliff. So now it wasn't an Achilles laceration, but it goes to show you're going to get some lasting repercussions anytime you deal with a major injury like that. So the main thing we can do is talk to actual doctors and then find out where the kid's reattachment was, find out how much it's going to shorten his Achilles, and then figure out his skating mechanics and see if that will be affected. Because I know he has a bit of ankle eversion, which basically means the midline of his ankle kisses the ice occasionally when he's trying to get up to speed, uses three-step area quickness. Will that be affected by a shortened Achilles? My common sense would say probably not, but who am I? I'm not a doctor. So this is one of those things we go back and forth and try to pretend and have some fun. But I think it's one of those situations where if somebody was like, where was he supposed to be in the draft? Say theoretically he gets back to 95% of what he was. Where should he be? It's still top 10. He's still a top 10 talent. He always has been for us. I think he is our Seth Jarvis of this class. We were the first to put this player extremely high. We believe in him wholeheartedly, and wish him all the best coming back from it.
Yeah. And if he's back in October, November, like it's fine. The worst part would be like a full year with no hockey by him. That would suck. But if it's somewhat similar to Peyton Krebs, like Krebs came back, 5 months after his surgery. So if it's anything like that, he should be back by October. If he's getting the surgery, now, he should be back October at least, I think, if it's anything like Peyton Krebs. So we'll see. Speaking of a guy who came back from an injury, we're going to talk about Roger McQueen now, from Brandon. I think he got hurt in October, came back mid-February, late February. So a lot of time has passed since the start of the year. J.Brad, you watch a lot of his games since he has come back. I mean, we all did. So what's your take so far of McQueen and his play since his comeback from his back injury?
For sure. Coming back off a back injury and then had a knee injury last year as well. So for a 6'5", larger bodied center, 2 tough injuries back to back in 2 years. 7 points in 7 games since coming back. We were just talking about it before, but 5 of those points in the 2 games against Moose Jaw. So worst team in the league. That's where he's got his points. Those were his 2 best games. He was very poor defensively, I felt, since coming back. I never saw him as some great defensive center. So not much change there. Still shoot first center. The skating's fine. The passing isn't too great that I've seen since he's been coming back. Like I said, if your 2 best games are against the worst team in the league, not a great start. But there's still some season left for him to really turn things around. And again, with those 2 games, I think that can be a momentum builder for him. Sure, not a great team, not great competition playing against, but he put up the points that he did earlier on in the year that made people turn their heads. So hopefully that can be a good momentum booster for him. Still has the good hands in stride. Definitely in that with the one of the back-to-back Moose Jaw games, he put that on display. Threw a few more hits than I've seen him throw as well, which is nice to see. Using that bigger frame, that's awesome. You always love to see that. Still some good puck control, and his play along the boards was fine. I felt he was more 50-50 than I'd seen him before. Lost a little bit more than I felt he had earlier on in the season in his board play. Also less explosive. Again, he's coming off the back injury, so I don't expect him to be the fast start player that he was now as he was early on in the season after that injury. But I still have my concerns with him. I said in our first meeting, that big of a guy coming off those 2 injuries does throw some red flags for me. And again, with, shoot first center, not the best passer, skating's fine. He's dropped a bit for me. I'm not going to lie, since he's come back. But, still a lot of room for him. If he comes out, he has a great playoff. Good. He's probably going to move up a bit. But as of right now, slow start off the injury, had a decent schedule coming out of it. It wasn't like he was playing the best teams in the league coming out of it. So 7 points in 7 games will take, but I do expect him to raise his game to stay where he is and then move up.
Yeah, Brad, again, we talk about him off air, but we've been talking about him since the start of the year, basically. Most of it was like, hopefully he's coming back because we really need him to play some games in the season and the playoff. So what has been your take so far in the 7 games that he has played since coming back?
Well, I thought he was awful out of the gate. The first 2 to 3 games, I was like, okay, let's give him some time. He is not up to speed. Everything was a little off. Just even basic playmaking that he normally would make was off the mark. His hands were all over the map. Typically, that's what he is. He's a fantastic handler in open space, and he can drive possession to the neutral zone. And all that was all flat. And it was like, okay, we're gonna have to circle back here in a bit. Let him catch back up and get resynced with his team. And then to J.Brad's point, I feel like yes, it's the worst team in the league, but at least it's the player that we were expecting to see against Moose Jaw there. So very interesting head-to-head with Lyden Lakovic. Very, very interesting stuff. So I'll say this is unexpected to me. The same doctor who I talked to about Carter Bear, he told me he's more worried about McQueen's injury. He said long-term that it can really, it can be one of those nagging injuries that comes back on you. So I was like, oh, that's not good because big kid. And to what J.Brad said, like he's launching himself with players, which you want him to be very intense and physical and use his frame. And he's doing that, but he doesn't know how to do it right yet. He's very raw. And he's going to have to learn how to do it right, because he's going to have to protect himself. He has to learn how to fall out of contact correctly, or he's going to put himself in harm's way, and then we got a real problem on our hands. So the injury situation, the Dub's killing us right now. But yeah, like, there's so much to talk about with this player in final rankings that are coming, way sooner than I thought. Like, I can't believe it's mid-March. What's happening? We're in a time machine. But the one thing I will say about this player that I think is misinterpreted publicly is, like, his playmaker rates are not very good. Like, they're not. So what's the handling, shooting upside, and how much offense is there really, right? Like, we have never seen him. I have seen his entire playmaking sample this draft. We have not seen him make a single double-layered, feathered, or saucered pass through traffic. It has not happened. This is not Jake O'Brien. Right? There's not Anton Frondel. Like, he's not making those types of passes. Now, the argument is, yes, random NHL scout who's listening to this, I hear you loud and clear. The argument is, it doesn't matter, because with the frame and handling combination, ability to peel off pressure, he can just bypass the first layer with the hands. Now it's much easier. He can simplify his playmaking and still be super effective. And that is true. And that's what we saw in Moose Jaw. He used his handling rate. He was more in sync with his skating ability in his hands. He was bypassing layers. He was making short area passes, putting himself in good positions, and getting a lot more accomplished. So he's more efficient. So maybe he's just not meant to be more than a streamlined power forward, which is a direct contrast to the player we'll be talking about in a second here, Lyden Lakovic. So that my takeaway is, he is what we thought he was so far. And that's important. Right, when we can validate and solidify that now, and then we'll break them down in detail for everybody in our final ranking for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we did mention that we're at, even in the first sample we got this year in October, we didn't like the playmaking sample that we saw there. We didn't even like the shooting sample that we got in October. So, I mean, the shooting is matter less than the playmaking, because we know he's going to score goals around the net, because he's huge and he's going to win battles in front of the net, in the slot. So he's going to get his goals there. And he does battle. He's not a soft, player. He does battle. He plays physical. So hopefully he stays healthy. But the playmaking is the part of his, tools that is a bit concerning for us going forward. And even if you look at just his stats, like, he's never been a big point guy. His first year in the WHL, I think he had 14 points. Last year, only 50. So this year, I mean, technically his stats are looking good, but if you watch the game in depth, you can see some flaw with him. But we're going to be patient. There's still more games to go, and hopefully we can see a bit more of an evolution in his playmaking, like an upgrade, and that would be really helpful because we have to compare him to O'Brien, Desnoyers, those type of center. If you want to go even higher in the rankings, like the Frondel, the James Haggans, all guys that can really pass a puck. Obviously they're not 6'5" like him, but we need to see that playmaking go to another level before the end of the year. At least give us some hope that he can get to another level when projecting him. So interesting player, and like you guys said, like, the injury in the dub this year have been, and it's been a bit of a nightmare for scouts to deal with. As Brad mentioned, we're going to move on to another player, Lyden Lakovic from Moose Jaw, the new captain in Moose Jaw since the Braden Yager trade. J.Brad, what's your take a bit on Lakovic since I guess he's been named captain and not playing with Braden Yager anymore?
Yeah, well, I think that's the biggest change for him, getting that C, which is awesome. Draft eligible captain, you like to see it. Hasn't changed dramatically for me. His scoring is still a concern for me, and the skating is still the best end of his game. love the skating on him. That combination of the size, the skating, and then the skill as well. He is very skilled, turning away from contact, using his feet and his hands to make some quick moves and make some plays. Really love that about his game. I do still have that scoring concern with him. Without Jäger, I was happy to see that his scoring didn't drop off. That was awesome. He still has that good shot. So there are positives for sure. But I'm not finding that he's driving as much as I wanted to see him drive. Without, like, because he's the leader now on that team. It's not just the C he has. He is the leader with puck on his stick offensively for that team. And I feel that I watch him and there's something missing. There's another gear that he's just not getting. His point totals aren't bad. He's over a point per game, but I did expect a little bit more with that, with, again, the size of the combo of the size and the skill, the skating, how he can generate those plays quickly coming out of the neutral zone and into the offensive zone. He gets a lot of chances and he still isn't converting at the rate that I want to see him convert. So not a ton of change for him, which is unfortunate. But I'm happy to see that he didn't drop off when Jäger left. So it does show that there's not that he's just the complementary player, which is nice to see. But I did expect him to take another level that he hasn't really grabbed yet. So hopefully we can see it, but there's not much time in the season left and he missed all of January. So definitely no playoffs for Moose Jaw this year.
Yeah, and just no playoff and no U18 because he's too old. So there's a few games left, so that's all we got. Brad, your take on Lakovic. I know you watched. You obviously watch him, but like most recently, you watch him versus Brendan, like more of a head-to-head battle with McQueen. So, what was your impression of Lakovic?
So there's a technical brilliance to him, but he's too technical for his own good. Some players recognize if they just drive hard and streamline themselves, they'll get more accomplished. And then some players can't get there. That everything has to be wizardry on the ice, right? And that's where he's at. He's in his own way. He doesn't realize it. And you can tell by the way he plays. So when you look at McQueen gets that concept. McQueen's whatever it takes to kind of put himself in the right spot, he'll do. He'll look ugly doing it, but he'll try out there and do what he has to do to get himself in positions for success. Lakovic is this wizard, just this technical wizard that just it's not Oscar Lausen or Ryan Suzuki. Like, there's some NHL scouts that have like no time for this player and they're very scared, and fair enough, because you look at, it's like, where's the passion? Where's the heart? Where's the desire? Where's the commitment? It's that phrase I've used in the Black Book before, the calm before the storm. Or what if there's no storm? It's just all calm. Well, there's one gear. That's his issue. He has no idea how good he can be. But it's not like a Frondel situation. You can make the statement and it applies to both of them for completely different reasons. And so with Frondel, it's like you have everything and you just don't realize it yet. But with Lakovic, it's different. It's again, that weird technical aspect that seems to be blocking the rest of him from being able to develop. So one of the most difficult rankings in the entire draft. If I was to be a betting man on terms of risk, like, he's right up there with Wozniak. It's him, Wozniak, who would be like a third, maybe Cam Schmidt, maybe. You're talking about like super talented players where there is a tremendous amount of risk depending on, like, all three have psychological makeup issues for different reasons. But Lakovic, it's like, you are a 6'4" monster with unlimited potential, and yet all we want is more. And that's scary. Sometimes you get these players like, Jérôme, how many clips did you send me of Patrick Roy losing his hair when he sees Pierre Engvall at the ice, right? Like, it's just these players can drive you crazy. They can try, like, if you hate your staff, if you truly hate your staff, it's like, yeah, draft Oscar Lausen, draft Suzuki, draft Edward Shalla. Yeah, you can draft, they're talented, but they will kill your coaches. Like, you got to be careful with them. That said, like, I do like Lyden Lakovic more than those players I just mentioned. Like, I think there's more here. I just think he just doesn't understand what he can be, and he needs the right development to get it. I still think a team will take him super high because in this class, like, there is only so far you can drop him. Like we were talking about a bit, Jerome, we saw a couple new rankings. It was like, whoa, yeah, no, that's a bit too far back there. There's way too much there, right? So it will be he's the most interesting player to me long term. Like, where is he in 5 years? He's the one. I'm fascinated to watch where he goes on draft day is fascinating. What he looks like in 5 years is fascinating. And I'll save the rest for when we our final ranking, because there's a ton to discuss with them. But to J.Brad's point, one thing I'll say for contrast reference is like McQueen versus him. McQueen is the better skater in straight lines. He has more stride depth, but then Lakovic is technically more sound, mechanically sound everywhere else. Better posture, better edge work, more dexterous. So that they're both good skaters, but for different reasons. Like McQueen's the straight line guy who controls the middle. Lakovic is the mechanically more sound skater who uses manipulation around the boards and peels off pressure and tries to drive possession occasionally through that.
Yeah, I'll move on to the next player, but just maybe one last thing about Lakovic is in this draft, you could look back and he's a top 5 player in this draft class. If everything clicks for him, like, you might get a steal if you're drafting him in the mid first round. If everything clicks, like, he could be as good as pretty much anyone in this class. But he's frustrating. I'm far from the president of his fan club, but you have to look at his talent. You're like, he could really, in a redraft in 5, 6, 7 years, he could really be at the top of this class. But usually NHL teams, they don't like risk, even more so in the first round. If you have risk next the word risk next to your name on the sheet, usually they're not too crazy about drafting those kind of player really high. I mean, maybe one team will not care and just go for it. So that's why I think, as Brad mentioned, it's going to be really hard to predict where he goes in the draft. Like, one team might just like, we're going to figure it out, and he's going to be like a real first line play driver for us in the NHL, and they draft him in the top 5, top 6, top 7. Very difficult player to really predict where he's going to go in the draft, and he's also like driving us a bit nuts because he's got so much potential, but he just doesn't really bring his A game enough for us. Speaking of bringing your A game, one guy who has brought his A game a lot this year is Benjamin Kindel from the Calgary Hitmen. Very, very opposite of Lakovic as far as like what they're looking like on the ice. One is 6'5", and the other one is 5'10". One is really fast. One is the skating is a bit of the issue with Kindel, but no one's going to question the work ethic that Kindel has, and he's also really talented. He's not just a worker. He's really talented. He's almost has 100 point as we're recording. I think he's got 98, so he should get 100 before the end of the season. J.Brad, I'll start with you. What's your take on Kindel? And he's been moving up on the list. So who knows where we put him come June? But maybe your take on his play in the second half.
Yeah, well, I think throughout the year, I think I've been the highest on Kindel out of everybody in the list. You just mentioned he has 98 points. By the time people are watching this, he could have 100. So that's the kind of point pace that he's been putting up. in his last 10, he's got 14. He had a slow last 5 where he only had 4 in his last 5. So, he can put up points in bunches. And the thing I love the most about that is he's scoring from everywhere on the ice. He'll get some goals in front of the net. He'll generate play through his vision from behind the net along the wall. He plays point on the power play sometimes. Yeah. So there's just so much he can do from all over the ice. And when you're that size and your skating's not great, you have to have other attributes. And for him, the intelligence is there. You can see it all over the ice in all 3 zones. Again, especially with that vision. He's doubled his goal total as well from last year. He had 15 goals. Now he's got over 30, and there's still time to go. Not a ton, but still time to go, and he's already doubled it. He's about 25th on our list if you saw our top 32, and I like that for him. I think he is that late first round kind of guy. But high intelligence, high compete, good skill. The skating, though, the live viewings I've had of him have been rough on his skating. It's not been fun watching him behind the net trying to come back down the ice when the other team's breaking out. That's been probably the weakest point of the skating because I'd say his intelligence when it comes to his positioning makes up for some of the skating. Because he'll know where the puck's going to be or where the play's going to develop, and he'll get there. So I'm not as concerned coming out of the zone and into the offensive zone with his skating because he knows where to be and he knows where he should be to create plays. But coming back into the defensive zone was a little bit more trouble for him, I found. But again, with a guy who's a little smaller, a guy with the skating, that ability to score from everywhere on the ice is probably the biggest thing for me. Because that's very translatable to the next level. So I think that's the best thing for me. And again, the scoring in not even just bunches, the scoring consistently in bunches is just icing on top there.
Yeah, I really like his shot. A lot of times we see smaller guys. They have in junior. You see, they're scoring a lot of goals, but a lot of goals are from in close, like from close from the net. And you're like, it's going to be a bit tougher at the NHL level to accomplish that. And Kindel's case, he can do that. Like some games that I watch, he look like the second coming of Brendan Gallagher. Like he really, like I know number 11 right shot from Calgary.
It's right there.
Yeah, so he does that sometime, but also like he can really shoot a puck. Like he can score from distance. So that does really help him, for his offensive game to translate. And obviously, he's a really good playmaker. He's smart, and his compete level is really good. It's just the skating. It's like sometimes I do watch him, and I'm like, okay, it's time to move him up on my list. I'm like, enough of this. I'm moving him up, and then I watch him skate. I'm like, ugh. Then I'm like, okay, Jérôme, calm down. Let's come down here. Don't go too crazy on this. But he's a really fun player to watch. It's just the skating. If the skating can get to a certain level, I think in the redraft he's going to be pretty high up. That's my only concern is the skating. But I'll say this: much improved from what I saw in October. That's why we watch all the games. As much game as possible is we want to see kids improve. And we've seen that with Kindel. Brad, maybe a few words by you on Kindel and what you've seen from him in your last few viewings.
He's gotten better. The consistency's coming around. True dual threat, and in this class where the talent falls off a cliff rather rapidly, true dual threats are hard to come by. So definitely it's going to be very interesting where he gets drafted too. We always talk about this skating basis. Okay, what teams seem to not care and really believe in their development teams and skating coaches, and it's always Tampa Bay, Toronto, and Columbus. What's interesting is right now Columbus would have the highest pick to be able to get him. We're talking really late picks for Tampa and Toronto. So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what teams are going to say, you know what, we can work with the skating. We'll make it better. The other factor I'll say is that if you're a bad skater, what do we look for? We look for a fast processor. We look for somebody with the visual processing and ability to map ice in advance, be able to like make passing trajectories when they're blind. He can do all those things. Like he has everything to be able to make up for the skating deficiencies essentially at this stage, which is why I think we're comfortable with him. I will say, like, I find it really hard to get a player comp. So maybe in the comments, anyone listening, if you think there's a comp out there for him, we wouldn't mind hearing it. I can't think of one. I can't get
one. You got one, J.Brad?
Who did? I think I had it written down. I can't think of it off the top of my head. Smaller guy can't skate.
Well, okay, I had one, but it was like a very extreme one because we were like arguing about like, okay, that was like maybe in November or December, and we're arguing about him, and I said, I'm not sure, like, well, I'm not sure about him, but you know, sometimes players just love to prove us wrong, and I said, look at this guy, he's just gonna become the next Claude Giroux. Like honestly, like there's some part of his game that's very cool. Like
didn't Giroux go like 25 or something, like something 20s, right? Yeah. So
and
that is around the range.
Smaller guy, couldn't skate, but super smart, super like high compete guy. But obviously, if we think he's the next Claude Giroux,
we have to move him up a little bit.
Yeah. We got to adjust some rankings there if we think he's there.
I don't think it's the player comparable that I would use, but like it's the one that's an extreme one.
Stylistically, I see what you're saying, 100%.
All right, but anyway, if anyone has any suggestion for that, you can write it in the comment on YouTube, and maybe you're smarter than us. You might find a better one than us. Like so. Anyway, we'll move on to our last two players, and we're gonna do maybe a head-to-head. I think we did this a few weeks ago, but J.Brad was not there, so we're gonna let J.Brad speak his truth on the two top defensemen out of the WHL, Radim Mrtka and Jackson Smith. We've been pretty vocal on Radim Mrtka as our top defenseman from this league. Second best defenseman in the draft, possibly. I know Brad might disagree with that. So, J.Brad, let's talk about Radim Mrtka versus Jackson Smith.
For sure. So I'll start a bit with Jackson Smith. Very confident with the puck on his stick. He's a really great skater. Coming up ice. That's with the puck. I spoke last in our last podcast about the dub about how he was making some of those decisions coming out of his zone with his passing that I didn't like. And as the year's gone on, he's held onto the puck more and been a little bit more selfish. And I'm not going to hold that against him because it's worked. So as he's gone through the season, his success rates have gone up while he's had the puck on his stick, as opposed to making those passes that weren't as great. Now I still want to see that because if you're spending a high pick on a defenseman, well, spending a high pick in general, you want to know the full scope of what you're getting here. So I do want to see a little bit more of that, but I do feel if the success rates are going up, then he knows something, and that's great. If you know who you are as a player and you're going to excel doing it, perfect. He's got the size at 6'3", 190. So, size-wise, he's still going to put on some weight. He's still raw. So there's still a lot going for him. Like I said, that the selfishness in the rush, I'm not holding that against him. I actually kind of see that as a plus because of the success rates. His physicality is a big plus. I do like the hits that he's been laying. I meant, again, last time I spoke about him, the prospect game, he laid a really big hit behind the net, and I really love watching him throw the body because I think his physicality is pretty good, especially in the offensive zone. Like I said, that side of his game, transitioning the puck, has been really good. And when he comes in and he's along the wall there, he really uses his vision well to find guys and shield the puck with his frame. So he's using it really well to his advantage when he's activating, and good things are happening. So, we'll take that all day. There are still times defensively where you have the moments with him. He has some of those where, shift by shift, you'll see him defensively and you're like, okay, I want more consistency. It's been better than earlier on in the season, but we're still seeing it a bit. The other thing, his shooting. So he's taking a lot more shots, which is nice to see. I do like how he keeps his shot at a level where his forwards can get sticks on it. So he doesn't really have the goal totals that you'd see some of the defensemen who have really good shots, who are taking from the point. He doesn't have those. Some of them are getting tipped in. But yeah, I feel overall with Schmidt, the development's been good. He's definitely moved up on my list. So yeah, big fan of Jackson Smith for me. We'll go over to the right side with Radim Mrtka, and wow, extremely consistent since coming over from Czechia. For me, I've been a huge fan. I watched him before in Czechia playing just to kind of get a little bit of a read on him before coming over. And wow, has the small ice helped him. He's been really a lot more opportunistic. He's been taking a lot of opportunities from his coach too. He's on the power play, he's on the penalty kill, he's playing 5-on-5. He's playing, I think, 30 minutes a night. So that's awesome. He's really, Seattle's not a great team. They're 8th seed in the West. They just clinched their playoff spot. So we will get to see a little bit of him in the playoffs, and then hopefully Everett will beat him, and then we'll see him at the U18s. So as much hockey as we can get from Mrtka, the better. I feel his vision in the extra minutes, whether it's from the power play or from the point, I feel his vision's been really good. So offensively, I've really liked his game. I didn't see a ton of that in Czechia, and really here with the power play time he's got, he's put up a good amount of points as really a more defensive kind of defenseman. So that's been really good overall. The other thing I like about him, gap control. The 2-on-1s he's played really well, I felt, in the dub. And having guys come outside to inside on him, a lot of the guys in the dub have had problems with that. So I've really liked that part of his game as well. He's using his size, like his frame, and he's using his reach as well, because he's cut that long stick as a 6'6" guy. So he's doing a really good job of forcing players outside. Solid defensively, like I mentioned, and that 30 minutes a night, awesome. We're getting a lot of viewing or a lot of time in our viewings of this guy. So it's been great, especially playing the special teams too. So if we're looking at them head to head, I'd say the biggest gap between them would be intelligence. I think with the defensive game that Smith has compared to the defensive game that Mrtka has, I do think Mrtka has that I don't want to say heavy advantage, but it's a bigger advantage for Mrtka. And with the offensive success that we've seen him have, it's not as big as a gap as it probably should be, or as we thought it would be earlier on in the season with how Jackson Smith has played offensively. Overall, I'd say Mrtka. You can say Smith is a little bit more skilled, and I'd say their competes pretty equal if you're comparing the two. I wouldn't give a massive edge over the other. I know Mrtka, we'd probably like to see be a little bit more physical with that 6'6" frame. And Jackson Smith, who is a little bit smaller, but not small, uses his frame a lot more. But yeah, overall for me, Mrtka's the guy who jumped Bear. So he's my winner of the head-to-head.
Yeah. I remember when Luke Shen came into as a draft eligible, his nickname was the human eraser. And Mrtka, I feel like his nickname is the time eraser. So he's really good defensively. He does take time and space away from Blair. And I think that's why I think his defense will really translate to the NHL. And I think his defense is better than Jackson Smith. But, Smith is a better skater, better athlete. I think he's more dynamic offensively, but I still find if I'm a team, I will pick Mrtka because of better defense, better hockey sense. So that's a bit of my quick thoughts on Mrtka versus Smith. Brad, you want to add anything on those two defensemen?
I mean, you guys have covered basically everything with him. I will say that Jackson Smith, one of the most modern day defensemen we've seen. Like, there is not a defenseman that uses more 10 to 2 turns. I've discussed this before, but it's very interesting and very important for him because what J.Brad mentioned with the exit playmaking rates not being as consistent as you typically want, you want the defenseman to be able to skate the puck out instead. And wow, can he ever do that? That's coming. So, it's a philosophical situation, like a team that prefers a toolsier hyper athlete with a bit more secondary offense, they'll take Smith. If a team prefers a bit more of untapped defensive potential and more intelligent hockey player, they'll take Mrtka. It's just down to philosophical interpretation and need. Really, yeah. I don't think you can say, well, BPA. We've talked about. We'll rant about BPA again at the end of the year, or end of the season when the final rankings. But yeah, they're for sure going to be 2 of the top 4 defensemen taken on draft day. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's a pretty. Take that one to the bank, Brad. I think that's a pretty. That's a pretty easy.
Stranger things that you never know, Jerome. You never know.
I mean, it's true. Like last year's draft, like holy crap, how the defenseman went in last year's draft. Like maybe that's not a safe bet to make anymore.
Yeah, so I think we all get caught up in like what we all have our own philosophies, opinions, and even on our staff, right? Like it's hard not to get into a bit of groupthink where we all talk together. And then you see everything else publicly, and then it's like, oh, this is what this class is, and then you see the real draft. It's like, oh no. Every year, people have very different interpretations of some players. That's for sure.
All right. We'll wrap this up, guys. So thanks everyone from watching. J.Brad, thanks a lot for coming on. Thanks for joining us. And we'll definitely do it again before the end of the season. If not, like our final rankings show. Obviously, we're gonna have try to get more staff on the pod for that one because it's gonna be a gigantic episode. I
10 hours minimum. Everybody, 10 hours.
All right, so we'll see you guys next week. Brad, thanks a lot again for co-hosting with me, and we'll talk to all of you next week with another episode of Scouting Session. So see you guys next week.